Hi friends, welcome back to 5 Minute Modern, where in 5 minutes or less we learn about an important artist, artwork, or concept in the history of modern art. My name is Cindy, and today we're considering war memorials. How do we memorialize the immense sacrifice and suffering brought on by war? How should we? And how are these questions complicated by the specific case of the Vietnam War, which many contend the US entered unnecessarily? Artist Edward Kienholz made a bold proposition in a 1970 work he titled The Non-War Memorial. In a concept tableau, Kienholz laid 5 US Army uniforms stuffed with dirt on the floor, beside a pedestal with a book containing 50,000 photographs of his dirt-filled uniforms. His original plan had been to make a full 50,000 of these uniforms and to lay them out like corpses in a meadow in Idaho. Over time, Kienholz theorized, the uniforms would rot and disintegrate, allowing the soil to return to the earth and wildflowers to grow where the uniforms had been. The idea was to confront viewers of the piece, both with the horrifying cost of war and with the speed at which most of us forget that cost. Though Kienholz would be unable to complete the full-scale project, this concept tableau of 5 uniforms and a photograph book remains a shocking and affecting piece. Kienholz was never an artist to shy away from provocation. Like many assemblage artists of the 1960s and 70s, he sought to make bold social commentary with nearly all of his work. In Kienholz's hands, this commentary could be particularly confrontational, as in the case of his Backseat Dodge 38, a 1964 assemblage depicting a sexual encounter in the backseat of a car. The piece was widely criticized for being too explicit when it debuted at the Los Angeles County Museum of Art in 1966, and it nearly led the Board of Supervisors to close the exhibit entirely, before striking a compromise in which the door of the piece would remain closed, except for adult audiences. Given this background, it's unsurprising that Kienholz would make a charged statement about the Vietnam War, still ongoing at the time that he made the non-war memorial in 1970. I personally find the most provocative part of this piece to lie in Kienholz's original concept that would have allowed the uniforms to rot and slowly be replaced by wildflowers. Perhaps none of us dispute the idea that a war memorial ought to recognize the sacrifice of fallen soldiers. Most war memorials hold up war casualties for glorification or even martyrdom. Consider, for example, the sweeping World War II memorial in Washington, D.C., in which gold stars represent 100 fallen soldiers each. Kienholz, however, suggests that this sacrifice will soon be forgotten, and to be honest, I'm troubled by that idea. War is horrible, surely unimaginably so for those of us who haven't experienced it. In the face of such suffering, I think many of us seek to reassure ourselves that there was at least some purpose to it. But in Kienholz's suggestion that war casualties are quickly forgotten, I see a stark challenge to that idea. And I see a condemnation, not just of war itself, but of all of us for forgetting its horrific cost. In 1971, just a year after Kienholz debuted his piece, the wife of a soldier still missing in action from Vietnam debuted the stark POW MIA flag, emblazoned with the phrase, "You are not forgotten." It's the exact opposite of the sentiment expressed by Kienholz. And this insistence on remembering the sacrifices of those who served would define the official narratives around the war. Consider the 1982 Vietnam Veterans Memorial, designed by architect Maya Lin while still a student. Lin's design is somber and minimalist. A black granite wall cut into the earth with the names of those who died in Vietnam carved into its surface. Some saw the design as insufficiently supportive of servicemen. A statue of 3 soldiers by artist Frederick Hart was added 2 years later following the outcry over Lin's original design. But when I look at Lin's design, I see a steadfast recognition of the sacrifice made by soldiers. The names of the fallen are literally carved in stone, a phrase we use as a metaphor to express permanence. To me, it bears soldiers the same promise as the POW MIA flag. You are not forgotten. And indeed, the memorial is visited by more than 5 million people each year, many taking rubbings of the names of friends or family members lost in the conflict. There's even an annual cross-country motorcycle ride called the Run for the Wall to honor the dead. And yet, as Vietnam War historian Mark Atwood Lawrence notes, by the early 1990s, American foreign policy already reflected that it had forgotten the lessons of Vietnam. In 1991, the US deployed to Iraq following that country's invasion of Kuwait, sparking the Persian Gulf War. Following the September 11th attacks, the US invaded first Afghanistan in 2001 and then Iraq again in 2003. In all these cases, critics charged that the US was fighting for faraway governments friendly to American interests, but bearing little legitimacy among their own people. The exact same criticisms that were leveled against US involvement in Vietnam. The war in Afghanistan would end catastrophically in 2021, with the Taliban government resuming control shortly after the US departure. Over 53,000 American soldiers would die in the wars in Afghanistan and Iraq. And all this makes me think that Kienholz's non-war memorial is perhaps less a condemnation than a warning, one it seems we've already ignored. I know this is another difficult topic, so thanks for joining me in giving it some consideration. Please let me know your thoughts in the comments, and I look forward to seeing you in the next video.